When Alex got her first real raise, $15,000 more per year, she did the math in her head on the drive home. That's $1,250 extra every single month. She said it out loud to herself in the car, almost like a prayer. She could finally breathe. She could finally stop doing the mental gymnastics every time her card got close to the limit. She could finally save. 1 year later, Alex opened her banking app on a Sunday evening, one of those slow, quiet Sundays where the week hasn't started yet and your brain drifts toward things you usually avoid thinking about. She scrolled down. Her savings account had $2,300 less in it than the day before she got the raise. Not a dollar more. Actually less. $15,000 had come in and somehow, invisibly, quietly, without a single dramatic moment, it had gone somewhere. She hadn't bought anything crazy. No designer bags. No renovations. No wild vacations. She had just lived. And that's exactly what makes this so unsettling. Because what happened to Alex is not unusual. It is, in fact, one of the most predictable financial patterns in modern adult life, and it happens to people at every income level, from someone earning $40,000 a year who gets bumped to $50,000, all the way up to a professional doubling their salary and still feeling, somehow, like they're falling behind. What happened to Alex has a name. It's called lifestyle creep, and it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask permission. It just quietly reshapes your spending habits, one small, completely reasonable seeming decision at a time, until the life you're living costs exactly as much as the money coming in. Sometimes more. The concept itself isn't complicated. When your income goes up, your spending tends to go up with it. The problem isn't that you spend more when you earn more, that's human, and honestly, to some degree, that's fine. The real problem is the word automatically. Lifestyle inflation is spending that rises on autopilot, not because you decided to spend more, but because your new income quietly rewired what feels normal. What once felt like a treat starts feeling like a baseline. What used to seem unnecessary starts feeling like something you deserve. And before long, the gap between what you earn and what you spend hasn't changed at all. You make more, yes. But you feel no richer. A study that made its way through financial media a few years ago found that 58% of Americans who received a meaningful raise had increased their monthly spending to match within 90 days. Not years. 90 days. The raise arrives and within 3 months, the lifestyle restructures itself around the new number. And the reason this matters isn't just mathematical, it's psychological. Because the whole time it's happening, nothing feels reckless. Each individual decision looks completely rational. A nicer dinner here. A slightly better apartment there. A subscription that saves time. It all makes sense in the moment. It's only when you zoom out and look at the full picture that you see what's happened. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on decision-making, described something he called mental accounting, the way humans categorize money in their heads, often irrationally. A raise doesn't feel like savings potential. It feels like a new budget category. A permission slip. And that permission slip, issued unconsciously, is where the money goes. So let's trace exactly where Alex's $15,000 went. Not in abstract terms. In actual, specific habits, 9 of them, that inflated quietly in the background of an otherwise normal year. And with each one, we're going to do the math, because the math is always more honest than the feeling. The first place money disappears after a raise is the most social, the most enjoyable, and therefore the easiest to overlook. It's where you eat. Before her raise, Alex was a Chipotle person. A lunch spot near the office person. The kind of person who thought a $12 meal was a completely acceptable lunch. After the raise, something subtle shifted. Not a decision exactly, more like a gradual recalibration of what felt right. A nicer sit-down place started feeling more appropriate for a weeknight dinner with a friend. A $35, $40, $45 meal for 2 stopped feeling like a splurge and started feeling like Tuesday. And to be clear, the food wasn't dramatically better. The experience was a little nicer, sure. But the hunger before the meal and the fullness after it were identical. The only thing that meaningfully changed was the number on the bill. This is one of the clearest examples of what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, the well-documented human tendency to quickly adapt to improvements in circumstances until they become the new normal. Daniel Kahneman, in his research on well-being and decision-making, found that people consistently overestimate how much pleasure an upgrade will bring them over time, and consistently underestimate how fast that pleasure fades into expectation. The upgraded restaurant stops feeling special. It just feels like where you go now. And in the background, the math is happening. If Alex ate out 4 times a week, which is incredibly common for someone in their early 30s with a social life, and the average meal shifted from $12 to $35, that's an extra $23 per meal. 4 times a week. 52 weeks. That's nearly $4,800 in a single year. On food that she doesn't remember eating. That felt, in every moment, completely reasonable. The second habit is bigger, quieter, and somehow the most normalized of them all. Housing. There is something about a raise that makes your current apartment suddenly look different. Not worse, exactly. Just smaller than what you could have. The bathroom you've been fine with for 2 years now has a flicker of something in it, a sense that maybe it doesn't quite match who you are now, or who you're becoming. This isn't vanity. It's a deeply human response to increased possibility. And the real estate market, rental or otherwise, is perfectly designed to exploit it. The apartment that's just a little bit nicer, in a slightly better neighborhood, with a small gym in the lobby, it's usually only a couple $100 more per month. $200. That doesn't sound like much. It sounds like nothing compared to a $15,000 raise. But $200 a month is $2,400 a year. And unlike a restaurant meal, housing costs are sticky. You sign a lease. You get used to the new place. You adapt again, and the next raise produces the same itch in a slightly different version. The philosopher Alain de Botton wrote in Status Anxiety about the way upward comparisons quietly govern how we feel about what we have. We don't compare ourselves to people across the income spectrum, we compare ourselves to the people just above us, to what feels like the next reasonable step. And housing is where that anxiety most visibly shows up. The raise doesn't create contentment. It shifts the reference point upward. And the gap between where you are and where you could be, which was the source of the original discomfort, remains exactly the same width. Just at a higher altitude. The third habit has its own particular flavor of logic. The car. There are very few things in modern life that carry more status symbolism than the vehicle you drive, and very few financial decisions that feel more personally justified when your income goes up. The car you own already works. It starts. It gets you there. But after a raise, it starts to seem like a gap between your current self and your aspiration. Maybe it's the age of it. Maybe it's what you drive past in the parking garage at work. Maybe it's just the sense that you've earned something better. And so comes the lease. Or the financed upgrade. And here's where the math gets quietly brutal. The difference between what someone was paying on their current car, or not paying, if it was owned outright, and a new lease or loan payment is often somewhere between $300 and $500 a month. $300 to $500. Every month. Without exception. 60% of your extra monthly raise income, gone before you've done a single other thing with it. The car, unlike almost any other purchase, also carries invisible additional costs, higher insurance premiums, higher registration fees, potentially higher maintenance costs on a more complex vehicle. And here's the thing that James Clear articulates well in Atomic Habits: the decision to upgrade doesn't feel like a recurring cost. It feels like a one-time choice. You sign the paperwork once. But the financial consequence arrives 12 times a year, for the entire length of the agreement. The psychological weight of the decision fades quickly. The charge does not. The fourth habit is one that people almost never talk about when discussing lifestyle inflation, because it happens gradually, in small increments, in a store where you're already spending money on necessities. It's the grocery store shift. There's a particular kind of food store that has become a cultural symbol for a certain level of adult life, the kind with wide aisles, beautiful produce displays, a warm lighting philosophy, and prices that are, depending on what you're buying, 40 to 60% higher than the standard alternative. And when income goes up, the move toward these stores tends to happen almost naturally. Not as a decision. More as a gravitational drift. The store is closer to the better apartment. The products feel more in line with how you think about your health and your values. The experience of shopping there is genuinely more pleasant. And each individual item seems like a small, justified upgrade. But here's what never gets calculated: a family or individual who makes this shift fully, from a standard grocery store to a premium one, is typically spending somewhere between $200 and $400 more per month on food with essentially identical nutritional value. The organic avocado and the regular avocado have nearly identical macronutrient profiles. The premium pasta and the store-brand pasta taste different to almost no one in a blind test. The behavioral economics concept of price-quality signaling explains this pattern. Humans are wired to equate higher prices with higher quality, even when the objective quality difference is minimal. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Marketing Research found that people consistently rated the same product as tastier and more satisfying when they believed it was more expensive. Alex's groceries weren't better. They just felt better. And that feeling cost her between $2,400 and $4,800 a year. The fifth habit is the one that most people, if they're being honest with themselves, already suspect as a problem, but keep adding to anyway. Subscriptions. The thing about subscriptions is that they were designed, with extraordinary psychological precision, to feel like they cost nothing. $12 a month. $15 a month. $8.99. Each one, considered in isolation, is completely defensible. For the price of one coffee, you get unlimited streaming. For less than a lunch, you get a fitness app. For basically nothing, you get cloud storage. And so they accumulate. Not in one reckless moment of spending, but one completely reasonable sign-up at a time. Streaming platforms multiply, first one, then two, then the family plan for a different one, then the sports add-on. There's the music service and the podcast app and the meditation platform and the productivity tool and the cloud backup and the premium newsletter and the recipe subscription and the ebook service. Each one is only $12 a month. 15 subscriptions at an average of $12 is $180 a month. That's $2,160 a year. On things that are mostly running in the background, used occasionally, and almost never audited. A 2022 survey by C+R Research found that consumers underestimate their monthly subscription spending by an average of over $100 per month. Not because they're being dishonest. Because the human brain genuinely struggles to add together recurring small amounts spread across different billing dates, different apps, and different credit cards. The money moves while your attention is elsewhere. And after a raise, the invisible threshold for what feels worth keeping rises, making every subscription feel even more justified than before. The sixth habit is the hardest to argue against, because it comes dressed as something positive. It's the "I deserve it" purchase. And to be clear, you probably do deserve it. That's not the issue. The issue is what happens when deserving it stops being an occasional, intentional act and becomes a standing permission structure for spending. A raise changes your psychological relationship with money in ways that are genuinely difficult to see from the inside. It creates, in the language of behavioral economics, what's sometimes called an entitlement effect. The logic is quiet but persistent: I work hard. I make more than I used to. I can afford things I couldn't before. So this thing I want right now, is fine. The thing might be a jacket. Or a gadget. Or a weekend trip planned on impulse. Or a series of smaller purchases that individually seem trivial but collectively represent a new weekend ritual of reward-based consumption. Morgan Housel, in The Psychology of Money, makes a point that cuts right to the heart of this habit: we judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. Someone else spending freely looks irresponsible. When we do it, there's always a reason, a justification, a context that makes it feel earned. The danger isn't any single purchase. The danger is the psychology that makes every purchase feel categorically deserved, and therefore never fully examined. Over a year of slightly more frequent, slightly more expensive reward-based shopping, the cumulative cost is often somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000. Invisible, because it arrived in dozens of small moments of deserved pleasure. The seventh habit has a word for it now, in financial circles, that makes it sound more sophisticated than it is. The word is convenience spending. But stripped of the framing, it's simply the habit of paying more for the same thing because you can. Before a raise, Alex cooked on weeknights. Not because she loved cooking, because spending $22 on a DoorDash delivery for a meal she could make for $6 felt obviously wrong when money was tight. After the raise, that same $22 delivery stopped feeling wrong. It felt like a reasonable trade, time for money. And yes, in some circumstances, that trade genuinely makes sense. The problem is that it rarely stays in some circumstances. It expands. The delivery fee becomes routine. The Uber becomes standard where the bus used to be fine. The pre-cut fruit in the plastic container, which costs 3 times more than the whole fruit, starts landing in the cart without a second thought. The airport lounge pass that basically pays for itself if you travel enough. The premium car wash. The dry cleaning for things you could wash at home. None of these are absurd. Each one is understandable. But together, over a month, convenience spending for someone whose income has risen meaningfully often adds up to an extra $250 to $400. That's $3,000 to nearly $5,000 a year spent on the marginal ease of not having to do things yourself. Richard Thaler's research on the pain of paying is relevant here. Physical cash registers a stronger psychological resistance to spending than a card tap or an app. The frictionless payment systems that power convenience spending are not neutral technology. They are designed to reduce the psychological pain of paying, which systematically increases the amount you spend without increasing the amount of thought you give to it. The 8th habit is one that happens in the context of relationships, which makes it particularly difficult to acknowledge, let alone address. It's gift-giving inflation. There's a social logic that most people experience but rarely discuss. As your income rises, you feel, consciously or not, a quiet pressure for your gifts to rise with it. Partly this is internal. The $40 birthday gift that felt completely generous 2 years ago now feels a little inadequate for someone you really care about, now that you earn more. Partly it's external. Social circles shift with income, and the norms within higher income social groups often carry higher implicit expectations around gifts, celebrations, and shared experiences. The holidays get more expensive. Weddings produce more elaborate gifts. Birthday dinners shift from a casual split to a place where the expectation is that you'll pick up the check. And none of this is dishonest or manipulative, it's just the invisible social economics of rising income. But the math adds up faster than people expect. Someone with a moderately active social life, close friends, family holidays, a few weddings or milestone events a year, who shifts their average gift-giving spend upward by even $30 to $50 per occasion will spend an extra $800 to $1,200 a year on other people's happiness. Which sounds almost noble, until you realize it's a largely automatic response to income rather than a considered expression of generosity. The 9th habit is the one that feels the most like reward, the most like living, and the most like something you genuinely earned, which makes it the most dangerous of all. It's vacation inflation. Before the raise, Alex took road trips. Stayed in Airbnbs. Split costs with friends. The trips were fun. Actually fun, the kind of fun that comes from novelty and company and freedom, not from the quality of the mattress. After the raise, something changed in how those trips felt in the planning stage. The road trip started to feel like settling. The Airbnb started to feel like something slightly below what was now appropriate. The flight started to seem reasonable where the drive used to seem sufficient. And then the hotel. And then the we might as well get the nicer room logic. And then the restaurant on vacation that's nicer than the restaurants at home, because you're on vacation. Each upgrade is completely understandable. Collectively, they can easily represent a doubling of vacation spend. A trip that would have cost $1,200 2 years ago now costs $2,500. 2 trips like that a year is an extra $2,600 in annual spending on experiences that, according to research on experiential happiness, produce roughly similar levels of remembered satisfaction regardless of cost level. Psychologist Elizabeth Dunn, who studies the relationship between money and happiness, found that above a certain modest threshold of comfort, additional spending on experiences does not produce proportionally greater happiness. The budget trip and the luxury version are remembered with similar warmth, because what we remember are the people, the moments, the unexpected detours. Not the thread count. So now let's do something Alex didn't do until it was too late. Let's add it up. Dining out, nearly $4,800. Housing upgrade, $2,400. Car payment increase, $3,600. Grocery store shift, $3,600. Subscriptions, $2,160. Convenience spending, $3,600. I deserve it, purchases, $2,500. Gift inflation, $1,000. Vacation upgrade, $2,600. That's roughly $24,000. on a $15,000 raise. Which is exactly how someone ends up with less in savings than they had before getting a raise. Because lifestyle inflation doesn't just absorb the new income, it has a way of exceeding it, especially when some of those upgrades involve recurring fixed costs like rent and car payments that push total expenses above what even a meaningful raise can cover. The thing is, none of this required a single irresponsible decision. That's what makes it so insidious, and so important to understand clearly. Alex didn't do anything objectively wrong. She didn't gamble. She didn't develop an expensive habit. She just lived, as most people live, with a slightly expanded definition of normal. And that quietly redefined normal is the mechanism. It's not what you spend. It's what you stop noticing you're spending. So what do you actually do? Not in a punishing, restrict everything way, but in a way that's intentional rather than automatic. This week, one thing, open your subscriptions. All of them. Check your bank statement or use an app that aggregates recurring charges. Find every single recurring payment and ask one honest question about each one. Have I used this in the last 30 days? Not, could I use it, or will I use it eventually? Actually used it, in the last 30 days. Cancel everything that answers no. This is not dramatic. It takes maybe 45 minutes. And for the average person doing this honestly, it recovers somewhere between $40 and $120 a month immediately. This month, implement what some financial planners call the raise rule. The principle is simple: when income increases, raise, bonus, freelance windfall, any form of new money, 50% of the increase goes directly to savings before it enters your spending consciousness. Not after you've lived on it for a month and decided what's left. Before. The day the raise takes effect, the automatic transfer is set. The reason this works where willpower alone doesn't is precisely because of what behavioral economist Shlomo Benartzi found in his research on savings behavior. People are dramatically more willing to commit to saving future income than to cut current spending. The raise hasn't been folded into your normal yet. That's the window. That's when the automatic transfer has to happen, because 30 days later it will feel like you need all of it. This quarter, do one honest audit. Pull your bank and credit card statements from exactly 12 months ago and compare spending category by category to today. Not to judge. Not to punish. Just to see. Groceries, dining, transport, entertainment, subscriptions, housing costs. See where the creep happened. Because you cannot manage what you cannot see, and most lifestyle inflation is invisible precisely because it happens in categories where you never expected to need to pay attention. And here's what this isn't about. It's not about never upgrading. It's not about eating at Chipotle forever or staying in your first apartment until retirement. There is nothing wrong with spending more when you earn more, on things that genuinely, durably improve your life and align with what you actually value. The question isn't, did I spend money? The question is, did I decide to spend money, or did money spend itself? Because that distinction, between intentional spending and automatic spending, is the entire difference between building wealth on a middle-class income and standing at the end of the year wondering where the raise went. Alex figured this out. Not in year one. Year one she was confused and a little ashamed and mostly just tried not to look at the banking app too closely. But in year two, after she traced the numbers and saw the pattern clearly, something shifted. She didn't become ascetic. She didn't cut everything. She just implemented the one rule. When her next raise arrived, smaller this time, about $8,000, she moved $4,000 of it directly to savings before the first paycheck with the new amount hit her checking account. She kept the apartment. She kept most of the subscriptions. She kept eating at the nicer places occasionally. But she did it by choice, not by default. 2 years after that moment in the car, the one where she first understood what had happened, she had $18,000 saved. And more importantly, she had something rarer and more durable than a number in an account. She had a relationship with money that wasn't governed by anxiety. She knew where her money was going, because she had decided where it was going. She enjoyed her spending with a clarity that made it feel genuinely satisfying in a way that the automatic upgrades never had. The goal, in the end, isn't to live like you're still earning what you used to earn. The goal is to live deliberately on what you earn now. To spend on things that actually matter to you, not on the invisible, automatic, entirely reasonable seeming habits that fill the space between your income and your intentions. The money you earn is a resource. Like any resource, it can be used purposefully or it can be used by default. Lifestyle creep is what happens in the absence of a decision. And the single most powerful financial move available to most people earning a middle-class income isn't a complicated investment strategy or an extreme savings rate, it's simply the habit of noticing. Of pausing, once a year or even once a quarter, and asking, is this life I'm paying for the life I would design if I sat down and thought about it? Or is it the life that assembled itself while I was busy? Because there's a version of your financial life that looks almost identical to the one you're living now, same income, same general quality of life, and it builds wealth steadily and quietly, year after year, without requiring sacrifice or deprivation. The only difference between that version and the one Alex lived in year one is awareness. And awareness, unlike a raise, doesn't cost a thing. If this felt familiar, if there was a moment in here where you thought, quietly, that's me, it might be worth sharing this with someone else who'd recognize it too. And if you've spent any time lately wondering why your savings don't seem to move even when your income does, the next video goes deeper into the psychology behind why most people's financial defaults are set against them, and exactly how to reset them. I'll see you there.